The Harry Potter franchise has once again come out with a banger, but this time it's a video game called Hogwarts Legacy. This time the game is trying to show us the wizarding world on a much larger scale. Despite that, it has raised some alarms, allowing players to use unforgivable curses and a problematic plot. Why are so many people against the game? Let's talk about it in detail. Starting with young wizards using unforgivable curses raises a few questions. We've all dreamt of being able to use those super badass unforgivable curses we saw in the Harry Potter universe. They're some of the coolest and cruelest spells out there. Turns out that's exactly what players will be able to do in the upcoming Hogwarts Legacy, with players being given a choice between going down the traditional route and completely avoiding them, or going full-on Voldemort and only using them. Canonically though, users of such spells are supposed to be faced with some of the worst punishments out there for using such curses. So how exactly does a young student at Hogwarts manage to pull it off? On the one hand, such curses in the game can be justified, simply to expand upon the world, while amplifying the open-world experience it promises players. On the other hand, the story could change things up to justify how exactly the player would be getting away with one of the biggest crimes in the wizarding world. But this issue is sparking a lot of controversy around the game, as developers try to give players complete freedom. Though many people are down for it, for the most part, the problem arises at the age of the character we'll be playing. We don't think anyone would be comfortable playing a character that goes around torturing and murdering people at the ripe age of 15. But then again, the game still brings something to the table that has always been missing from the franchise, and is also something most fans have wanted for a long time. We all just wish it wasn't while we were playing as an actual child. Additionally, all curses we can use in the game lets us freely use all 3 main curses, but that's all we know till now. For all we know, there might just be a bunch more they add that could be much worse than what we've seen before. Most spells from the Harry Potter universe are low-key, and have much more of a use as a utility than an actual weapon. Still, the unforgivable ones completely change the game, even leading to a lifetime of imprisonment at Azkaban most of the time. Let's start with the last of the unforgivable curses, and probably the least deadly one. Well, not a directly deadly one. That is, of course, Imperio, a curse that, if successful, can lead to the user's full control of their victims. We've also got Crucio, which is mainly used to torture people. As the name states, its main use is bringing an ungodly amount of pain to the person it's cast upon, making it one of the most feared spells out there, and for a good reason. And we can't forget about Voldemort's favorite curse, also known as the Killing Curse, Avada Kedavra. All of us know what it does, but for any of us that don't, the spell can kill someone on the spot, and is considered the strongest spell in the entirety of the wizarding world. What could bring the game back from being shunned by the community it's being made for? Is there anything that the developers can't even do? We certainly hope so. Finally, how does J.K. Rowling make the situation worse? This entire debacle would probably not be as bad as it is now if J.K. Rowling wasn't one of the most controversial and borderline hated people out there. Even actors that have previously played in her films are now speaking out against her, as they declare their undying support for the marginalized community, specifically the trans community. What exactly has she been up to though? The author has been making quite a lot of comments on the transgender community, which are transphobic, and no one can deny that. She started by first talking about the community in an opinion piece written about them, saying that a woman is defined by her menstruation ability. Many people weren't happy about this at all, and no one should be in support of such slander of those already up against so many issues. Sadly, that isn't where it ends. She then decided to double down on her takes in Turf Wars, a blog post in which she talked about how she's against activism for the trans community, considering that the author was a huge inspiration for women just a few years ago. It's sad to see how things have changed, and how we should not idealize anyone. Uncovering the dark secrets of Hogwarts Legacy controversy. Coming up is Hogwarts controversy. It's sad to see that one of the biggest franchises that most of us grew up with and love so dearly has been reduced to nothing but controversy. While on the one hand, the stories in Hogwarts have been full of a lot of valuable lessons, there is a much darker reality hidden under its polished hood, as most of us had to come to terms with recently. The Harry Potter universe is littered with diversity issues and has a lot of tone deafness. It's being called out for much worse things, such as anti-Semitism being a big part of the upcoming game. On the other hand, the author isn't making things easier with her comments about the trans community. While most of that criticism has been towards pretty much all of the films they've made around the universe yet, including both the main movie series and the Fantastic Beasts series. Now the upcoming game adds itself to the list, especially since a lot of older fans simply refuse to play it, even though the game looks incredible, and we finally get to be a part of the Harry Potter universe like never before. It's sad that the author's actions, along with a lot of insensitivity, led to a distaste for it all across the board. Next up, the IP has some diversity issues. While the franchise does does feature some characters from diverse backgrounds. There isn't a lot out there, and none that play a role that would be considered significant. Now, the upcoming game has been on full blast all over the internet for the same reason, though admittedly, we don't know much about the plot other than the synopsis, and that's enough to set off most people's alarm once again, especially with the rhetoric that the author has been spreading around. The latest claims that the LGBTQ+ outreach program set up by the South Wales Police is nothing but an attempt at virtue signaling. But if we go back to the films, we come to realize that even though at times there were some diverse characters out there, most of them were just forced into it for the sake of diversity and adding nothing to the narrative. Some prominent examples, since there isn't much to go off of in the first place, would be the offensive parody of Indian culture that the films did when the Patil sisters walked into the Yule Ball in the fourth Harry Potter film. Not just that, but even the names these characters got were super ignorant and based on offensive stereotypes despite everyone else having the coolest names. With that said, the game's developers probably want to address these issues since they are not J.K. Rowling, and at the very least, like their product to sell, even if they don't want to be morally correct. Moreover, is the upcoming game Nazi propaganda? We wish that diversity was the only thing wrong with the upcoming game, but there is so much more, all the way up from the franchise's history to how they're portraying the bad guys in the upcoming game. We also wish that the ruined legacy that J.K. Rowling has made for herself would have stayed on Twitter, but it seems like it's made its way into the game as its plot has recently panned out. What's so bad about the plot though? Well, for starters, it's getting a lot of criticism for making us, the player, actively work hard to ensure that goblins don't get the rights they deserve. If you think that sounds kinda anti-Semitic, you are right. The game's synopsis says that we're back in the 1800s, and this time we're gonna be stopping a goblin rebellion. Of course, they work alongside dark wizards to try and get rid of the government formed by the wizarding world. But is that just because the game depicts a time from the past and is trying to stay accurate to how it's been depicted both in our world and the wizarding world? Or is it being insensitive just for the sake and because it was the easiest plot to come up with, and everyone involved just wanted to make a quick buck? Even in the original films, goblins just look like how Nazis represent their Jews in their propaganda. Is that really because of anti-Semitic imagery, or are we just looking too deep into it? And finally, goblins in the Harry Potter universe. It could simply be a case of the internet being, well, the internet, but the game's story, at least on a surface level, really seems problematic. While yes, they're a completely different species that doesn't even exist, they can very well serve as a metaphor for real life. While there's not much more info about its plot, in the Harry Potter universe, goblins are generally treated as a vastly inferior kind of being. The films show us that they aren't even allowed their wands, let alone any kind of education that would rival the wizards we're familiar with. We can only imagine how much worse it would be if we went back to the 1800s. On top of us trying to stop an uprising started by people who just want their fundamental rights, it is messed up. But while the title makes them seem like villains, it could be the opposite, and we could be playing the villain instead. That might be the only way to save this game from horrible imagery and PR. It seems like once again, we're gonna have to wait and see how things play out. And with that, that's a wrap on this video. What are your thoughts about the upcoming game? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.